Tom is in a hurry because he needs to catch a boat tonight, so
hurry
he's
cat.
probably not going to make it a very long talk.
But yeah, you're trying to extract a promise there. I'll try. I'm here to talk about something very simple today. Actually, it's not something even new, but it's a new implementation of an existing idea. First of all, I'd like to say, because I'm going to have to rush off, it's my first time here in person at the Creative Amsterdam. I've had a blast. Thank you to all the organisers for a very welcome and interesting conference. So yeah, my name's Tom. For the few people who don't know me or haven't met me or haven't heard me mouth off in somebody else's presentation, I got involved with XML at Oxford University Press almost 20 years ago now. I had a little bit of a sojourn as a freelancer for about 10 years and worked for some friends like Adam. And I'm now back at OUP, which is a little discombobulating but very nice. And I want to talk today about validating Word documents. So I'm going to, this is the say something 3 times. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. We're going to talk about, in general, the problems with authoring in Word, the challenges involved and why we need to do it at all. I'm going to mention the prior art here, which is something written by, sorry, I'm just having a senior moment, by Andrew Sales. And he talked about that at XML London in 2015. I'm going to talk about how the landscape has changed since then and why I'm revisiting this. And then we'll have a little demo and time for questions. And then I have to run to catch a train. So let's give it a go. So authoring in Word. Is it a good idea? What are the problems? Well, first of all, it's worth saying that in publishing, which is the field, the perspective that I'm coming from here, most content, I think I would say, without any evidence to back it up, is authored in Microsoft Word or a similar word processor. I think for journals in some sciences, they might prefer to use LaTeX, but the vast majority of authors are not publishing experts, they're subject matter experts, and they use the ubiquitous tools that are available to them. And there's a problem with Word because it's written by humans, and there's a problem with humans, and it's the problem with us is we're clever. That's our problem. Computers' problem is that they're stupid. Humans' problem is that we're too clever for our own good, and we're very used to inferring information. If you read a sentence in a book that says Charles Dickens' Bleak House, 1878, whatever it would be, and Charles Dickens is in bold and Bleak House is in italics, you will naturally infer that they're talking about a bibliographic reference to a book, that the author is Charles Dickens, and that the title is Bleak House, and that it's published on in such and such a year. And furthermore, when you see that pattern repeated in the book, you can infer what the meaning is. We're very good at inserting our meaning, and when we write documents, the same thing occurs. We're used to these kind of de facto standards, these habits of ours, and a lot of implied meaning can be lost when we start to talk about capturing as XML. There's a number of issues with Word as an authoring format for XML because they're inherently very different things. XML is inherently a hierarchic data structure, as you all know. Structures contain structures, and there's no depth limit. Word is inherently serial, and I've heard it described as a ODTA, one damn thing after another. It's just a list of paragraphs. XML is inherently abstract. We try, at least I hope we try, if we're writing good semantic XML, to have XML that is available for multiple different outputs. That's part of the big promise for XML in publishing. We can push our content to our physical books, to our websites, to ebooks, and to third-party app providers, potentially. That means that the data has to actually describe what's going on. It can't just be a visual representation. But that's what we have in Word. And I love Liam's adaptation of WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. No, what you see is all you get. There's no way of adding extra information. There's no structural information. There's very little in the way of adding metadata. All we've got is styles, which I'll talk about in a second. And it's inherently geared towards producing paged media, which is a little bit ridiculous now that very few of us, I think, print out documents to read them. It's all on screens. But there you go. We're kind of stuck in this pre-digital, paper-based age because that's the paradigm we're used to. Change is hard. This kind of follows on from what I said before. Elements in XML capture implicit semantic information, and they make it explicit for computer processing. And as I said earlier, that continues to an arbitrary depth. So you have contextual information based on what your element's parents, grandparents, and ancestors are. You don't have that in Word. What you have in Word is associated styles that are abused by people like me to add semantic information associated with those styles. They're not there to do that. They're there to make the text look pretty. But that's what we've got, so that's what we'll have to use. The problem is you've only got two levels of hierarchy there. You can associate word styles at a paragraph level, and within the paragraph you can associate them with these things called text runs, which have a nasty habit of proliferating like rabbits as soon as you make any edits. You split up their strings in Word documents. And this kind of leads on to the big thing in my book, which is validation constraints. XML is always constrained. At the very least, you have the constraints of well-formedness. You often, normally, I might say, have some kind of grammar that's associated and that's validated for your documents. And often, that grammatical definition of what should be there isn't enough. We have some kind of rules-based processing, and the big one is Schematron, which I'm assuming everyone here has heard of Schematron, which is one of my favorite add-ons to the XML world. Word is completely unconstrained. And actually, that's not entirely a bad thing, as we'll see in a second. But it's bad news for me, because if I'm getting Word documents in and I want to create XML from them, there's a lot of work that I have to do to make sure that these things are standard and compatible and able to be put into a capture or transformation process. You start in Word with a blank page. That's the tyranny of Word, but it's also its greatest strength. So Word, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. I'm not a fan, you may have picked up. But I can't seem to quite get away from it. This proof of concept that I've worked on, that I'm talking to you about today, came across because we had a project which has now fizzled out, but I know it's going to come back. So it hasn't met the rubber hasn't met the road in real life yet, but I know it's going to. And when we started talking about this and the requirements for this project, it initially involved another product which was called Author. I'm not going to say which company it's from. But with a tool called Author, you would expect it has some kind of authoring capabilities, but the department I was talking to in the press had really been burnt by trying to use this as an authoring tool. It didn't work for them. And they would come up with phrases like this. And I wish it was the only context I'd heard this phrase in. They need to use Word. It's what they already know how to use. Training them to use something else will be too expensive. They've tried using something else, but it's too constraining. Actually, when you start writing a question, you need that blank page. We need to start without the structure initially and then add it in later. So there are reasons why we need to use Word. Some of them are technical, some of them are very much in the human domain. If my stakeholders refuse to use Word, refuse to use anything but Word, my hands are tied. But there are some valid reasons as well. Costs of implementation of new systems are never nothing. Things take work, change takes work, not least on behalf of all of the authors who have to learn the new tool. So there's a cost of training as well. As I mentioned earlier, if your stakeholders are reluctant to change, you may have luck changing their minds, but you may not, and you may have to accept that you have to choose your battles. And then the needs of the author can vary, the constraint needs can vary. As I said, one of the main issues they had with this author tool is that they needed to start writing 5 or 6 questions at the same time and then split them out later. And there was no way of doing that within the constraints of the tool they were using. Normally, in publishing, this is mitigated by a copy edit stage. So if you're in an academic publisher like I am, your author will write something, and about 2 years later, it'll finally get through the commissioning editorial stage. It'll get sent off to some typesetter in India or the Philippines, and they will produce your XML for you. And they will have several teams that do that. And the first team will actually work in the Word document. There'll be high-level proficiency in English, and they will provide your copy editing to make your manuscript standard and follows all the rules that they need for whatever in-house tools and production techniques they need to produce XML. As I say, I think for out-of-house authors, that's very much the norm across several publishers where I've worked. In-house authoring, you might be luckier, you might be able to persuade people to use a different tool. But then again, that's not the case that I had with this project. They didn't want to use copy editing because it was too expensive. They were employing their authors directly, but they didn't want to use a tool that would make it easier. And I had lots of comments like, well, surely it's easy to produce it from Word. And if it's so hard, why don't we just use AI? They're very upset when I explained to them that the cost of their quality control for AI-produced transformations is likely to be higher than the cost of actually doing the transformation safely yourself. It takes longer. Time to market is another big consideration. And this is the bit that I care about. Generally speaking, the idea when you're capturing XML is to get the ideas that are in the author's head into your XML document. Whether he knows he's expressing them or not, that implicit knowledge needs to be made explicit. And the more steps we have in between the author, the more time we have between the author writing the content and capturing it as XML, the more noise can creep in there, the more value is missed, the more likely you are to have errors. So what they really wanted is to automate transformations from Word. But because Word is so loose, that's really hard to do reliably with a transformation without running into some problems. And, you know, it's not always obvious what's going to be important, even for an in-house author. We need some form of QA, not just on the output of the transformation, but on the input before we transform, preferably at the authoring stage, so these people know that they've captured all of the information they need to in the correct way. So I knew that this was coming. I thought it was going to come a little bit faster than it is, but I still think it's coming. And I started to go out and have a look because my manager has said, tell them it's out of scope. And I told them it was out of scope. And they said, well, we have to do this. They didn't have any other alternatives. I knew, and I said to my boss, I'm going to have to bite the bullet and do this. Otherwise, it's never going to happen. What do I need? I need QA. And I was there in London in 2015. I was at Andrew's talk. So I knew that Schematron for Word was a thing that existed. It was last updated in 2016. So it's clearly not very well used. I think part of that is because he wrote it for LexisNexis and they forked it and did their own thing. Here is the comedy. Here is the resource for that if you want it. It's published as an Apache license open source. And the way it works is it implements a schematron over the Word document. So you have a schematron that's written for the underlying Word XML format. You have to save your Word document as a Word 2003 XML file. And it then runs an ANT transformation, takes the schematron rules, the rules that fire are turned into Word comments, and they're injected into a new version of the Word document. So I could see pretty quickly that there were some ideas here that I could use to improve this approach. First of all, I don't want to have to use Word 2003, and I don't want users to have to worry about saving it as an XML file. Secondly, the ANT workflow is going to break the flow of the authors as they're writing these books. It's going to turn it into a whole separate step that they're going to do once at the end. It's going to be a faff. People aren't going to want to do it. They're not going to engage well with the process. I didn't really want to do it the same way. It uses the Schematron reference implementation. And we now have a really good suite of tools, alternative tools, which I think are potentially better, being written by David Mouse, such as his XSLT implementation. So there are some areas that we could work on. There's also some new opportunities in the last 10 years. Office has changed. It's become largely online. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I'll not comment. But one of the changes, perhaps because of that, is that the way Office add-ins work has changed. What we used to call the Visual Basic plugins for Office documents. They have panels in your Word document. We'll see them in a moment if I don't run out of time. And those are HTML. And the preferred programming language, although you can use lots of different ones, is JavaScript. Coincidentally, some lovely people at Saxonica have written a tool called Saxon.js, which works in JavaScript. And I think, And that's really the very simple idea behind the proof of concept that I'm about to show you. I can take Saxon.js instead of Ant and Saxon in Java, and I can run it from within Word itself on the internal representation of Word's XML. I can poke it back into the Word document, inserting any comments, and I've got a way of validating Word documents. So let's have a quick demo. So here is the original demo Word document from Andrew's, because I'm a fan of reuse. And we can see it's just a little abstract of his original idea. And here on the panel on the left, you can see completely unstyled, I haven't put any effort into this whatsoever, is a little panel. And this is actually a web form. So you could imagine that you could have drop downs here to select different Schematron phases or even different Schematron rule sets. But at the moment, this is hard coded to run just the demonstration Schematron. And I press the button, and lo and behold, we've got a little bunch of QA comments. We can see, as an example here, we've got a reference that's not been marked up with the reference style, although it has been styled. And correspondingly, down somewhere down here, we've got could not find a citation reference. So we've got some really good sort of Schematron rules that are looking across the document at different code constraints. We can fix that. I just need to get the stars pane up. So that needs to be a bib head, I think. If not, it'll tell me. This reference here needs to be a bib ref. And I just noticed that this reference down here doesn't have a date. So it's complaining that it's February 2015. It's not an ISO date. We don't have an ISO date to put in there. So I'm going to put in a little comment to say, what no date? And then I can rerun. And we'll see that some of those comments have now gone away. We don't have a comment on the 3 here anymore. We don't have a comment on the reference. My comment that I've added has been retained, but all of the QA comments have been stripped out and reapplied. So we've got this iterative process that's available as the author is authoring. 0 minutes. I'll just wrap up very quickly then. That's available as a fork. It's still Apache open source, which is why it's on the XML GitHub repository and not the OUP one. You're more than welcome to use it to contribute. I have some things in mind that I want to do when I've actually got an application for this. I want it to, at the moment it's still running the Schematron skeleton implementation. I want it to use XSLT optionally. I want to change the add-in design so that we have config files and you can produce your add-ins for your specific use cases. Each add-in that you produce will be for a particular Schematron rule set. I want to be able to support phases. The original Schematron for Word supported other Word documents. I don't care about that, but it's, it can go on the roadmap. If anybody cares about it, they can help implement it. And the last idea is it's quite hard to write Schematron rules for Word documents, particularly because of the way text runs break up. Andrew had an idea that he talked about that he never implemented of having an abstract language to describe Word document structures. It would be quite nice to implement that and have that automatically transform into more generic Schematron. That's what I just said. And that's my last slide. So thank you very much.
You did very well on the time, considering that you started late. Is there anybody who wants to say or ask anything? Yes, Martin.
This looks really, really, really cool. And I really like the fact that you're getting constant feedback on your document on these kind of rules that an author will just forget at some point. What I was going to ask is, did you consider, or is it possible to do these kind of things just not on demand, not like clicking a button, but basically every keystroke, so it can constantly give feedback on your document instead of having to do the button click?
That's a great question. I mean, the short answer is I don't know, but I imagine it would be. The trick is that Saxon.js is not a JavaScript library, so you have to import it as a script in the web page for the panel. So I imagine to trigger that, you have to be able to talk to the panel somehow. I don't know how to do that in Word, but if it's possible, then yes, it should be possible. Whether you want to do it every keystroke, it's quite a quick transformation, but that's quite a short document. So that would require some further investigation.
Zoom heard you, Norm.
I'm not muted here.
Okay.
Nico, can you do anything?
Maybe somebody could repeat the question for Norm. Oh, hello, Norm.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to say, Tom, that I think this is inspired and wonderful. And when you asked me if this would work, I thought that's insane, and I'm very, very pleased that it does work. So congratulations.
Thanks, Norm.
Then there's a question from Yuri.
Yeah, I was just wondering, is it possible to also do the squiggly lines as the
Oh, I'd love to do the squiggly lines.
right?
Yes. Maybe I should have that in my future implementation. The question is how are the squiggly lines stored? Because I don't think they're stored in the underlying XML representation. Anything that is, you can transform. So what I've essentially done here is written a transform from SVRL, this output from Schematron, that automatically creates a transform for the Word format. And it happens to create comments, but you could do other things potentially.
Thank you very much, Tom. And
Thank you, guys.
yes.